Hello and welcome everybody to ICMDA webinars. I'm Dr. Peter Saunders, the Chief Executive of the International Christian Medical and Dental Association, which brings together about 60,000 Christian doctors and dentists from 107 affiliated national movements worldwide. And today on ICMDA webinars, number 264, we're very honoured to have Dr. David Nikles with us from the Sunshine Coast in Australia, just north of Brisbane, on the subject of catalysing Christian counselling in the global south. And churches and people helpers in many global south nations are feeling the need to become better equipped to offer integrated, psychologically robust, biblically sound Christian counselling that embraces whole person care. And this talk is going to present a simple strategy and associated integrative approach to Christian counselling that works sensitively across cultures, and will briefly introduce resources that have been developed to assist this process. The principles are going to be illustrated using the work of two organisations, Asian Christian Counselling Association and its partner Living Wholeness, which collaboratively are strengthening and equipping lay, pastoral and professional Christian counsellors across Asia and recently into Uganda. More broadly, there'll be an invitation to form national Christian counselling associations so that the body of Christ may work more synergistically together in this field, and some practical tips on how this might be facilitated as well. So we have Dr. David Nikles. He is an Australian family physician. Hi, David. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be here.
Work in China in 2005 in the area of mental health and counselling training. And his vision is strengthening Christian counselling across the global south, especially in Asia. David is co-founder and CEO of Living Wholeness, and he's co-founder and an executive team member of the Asian Christian Counselling Association. So he bridges both of these two bodies. David, such a pleasure to have you here today. And we really look forward to hearing what you have to say and to engaging with you in the Q&A afterwards. Over to you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, great to be here. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this talk. Thanks, Peter, for your kind introduction. I was going to just share a little bit about my background, but Peter's done that already. So really 20 years in the kind of area of mission, mental health, Asia. And I'll put this photo up here just to show you this is kind of my sweet spot, teaching a bunch of pastors and Christian counsellors in Sri Lanka this time, but we teach in various countries with my team. We have a team of 5 in this shot here. And we were teaching denominational leaders about what is Christian counselling. So that's kind of a little bit of a snapshot of sorts of things that I do. Of course, this talk today is about really focused on the global south, so Asia, Africa, South America particularly, and of course some of the islands of the Pacific. I'd like to just, in a sense, define what I mean by Christian counselling, and to say that we have the understanding that there are kind of 3, separate elements, or it's 3 separate paradigms of Christian counselling. So lay counsellor is usually someone in a church setting maybe, or they might be a taxi driver or a hairdresser, but there's someone who's a compassionate listener, someone who's a gifted volunteer, because it's usually free, it's accessible, and they might have had some basic training. And then there's pastoral, what we call pastoral counselling. So they would be church and community-based people, might be a pastor of a church who counsels people. Usually this kind of counselling is brief, focused, strongly biblical, and usually has a significant prayer base. And then, of course, you have professional counsellors who have advanced training, often a master's level. They might be a social worker or a psychologist or a family doctor with extra training in mental health. They usually have broad skills, good experience, good knowledge, and they are really good people who can train others, actually. So just recapping, those 3 different I guess, levels in a sense of counsellor: a lay counsellor, a pastoral counsellor, and a professional counsellor. And as the talk goes along, you'll understand perhaps a little bit more about these different roles and how they help people. Also, during the talk, there are going to be just a few places where I invite some reflection. So if you have a pen and paper or access to that, just maybe take a moment to get organised with that now, because I'd invite you just to jot down a few notes when we have these reflection spots. I'm going to use the case, it's just obviously a made-up case, but this happens. So we have a lady called Esther, who's a 16-year-old female who's living in Pakistan. Unfortunately, she was raped by a soldier. She was rejected by her family when they found out that she was pregnant. She managed to find a job at a local bar, but the bar shut and she lost her job. So now she's 6 weeks pregnant. She's significantly depressed. She would report that her mood is about 3 out of 10. If 1 is, terrible and 10 is fantastic, her mood has been for the last 3 weeks around about 3 out of 10. The bar owner heard about this and has pity on her and brought her to your clinic. You can see that she's quite distressed. She does agree that she has some thoughts of killing both herself and the baby, and functionally, again, she's around about 3 out of 10. She's not really eating, she's not sleeping, she's just kind of a bit, I guess, disoriented and distressed and anxious, probably from the lack of sleep as well as the situation that's unfolding, and she's quite withdrawn. Now, the problem is you're at your medical clinic, it's just about to start. You've just started seeing your clients in the morning and it's at maximum capacity, and you've got really, maybe 5 minutes for this young lady. So that's kind of just a case that we're going to carry through the duration of the talk. Coming in from a different angle, I'd like you just to pause for a minute and consider Isaiah 61 verses 1 to 4. It's clear in this passage that God loves the brokenhearted. He loves the poor, the captive, the prisoner, those who are mourning or grieving or despairing. We, as his people, are called to bring good news to the poor, to bind up the wounds of the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for captives, release from darkness for prisoners, to proclaim the year of God's favour, to comfort those who mourn, and bestow a crown of beauty for ashes and a garment of praise for despair. Doing this will help to restore the devastated places, renew the ruined cities, and rebuild ancient ruins. It's the absolute privilege we have, Jesus through us, planting oaks of righteousness for the display of his splendour. Just take a moment. This is one of my favourite scriptures. I find Psalm 37 verse 4, it just always helps me find the direction and the purpose in life that God made me for. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And we're not talking about cars and houses and stuff like this. We're talking about the desires of your heart to serve him, right? So it's like a compass, I think. We come to God, we say, what do you want me to do? How do you want me to live? I delight in you. And he puts those desires in our hearts. And I just invite you to consider, to ponder What are some dreams and desires he might have placed in you regarding the brokenhearted? I imagine many of you are serving in areas where there are many brokenhearted people. What is it that he is calling you to especially? I'll just give you a few moments to think about that. And just jot that down as we go through the talk. Take notes if you want, or just even make this a prayer between you and the Lord and see what he's saying to you as we go through the talk. So back to, I guess, some medical statistics. And I think many of you may know these, be aware of this. You know, they say about 1 billion people, that's 1 in 8 people on the planet, are worldwide are affected by some sort of mental illness, and 80% of that is in the global south, right? That's a lot of people in the global south. Depression, I think you would know, is a leading cause of global disability. And suicide accounts for something like 750,000 deaths annually. Again, 80% of these being in the global south. Why is it that, times are tough in the global south? Well, there's so much in the area of natural disasters, conflicts, war, mental illness itself. Poverty reduces access to effective treatments. And with many mental illnesses, if they're treated early, the prognosis is much better. But when there's poverty and lack of resources and lack of providers, these things can escalate. So mental illness becomes more difficult to manage. Addictions, violence, domestic violence, displacement, refugees, trafficking, these things are all sadly so prevalent in the global south, and they all compound to increase the incidence of mental illness. Mental illness affects more than just the patient. If someone's depressed, it affects their spouse. It affects their family if they're a mum. It affects their friends, even their community. So it's a community, a friends, family, spouse issue as well as affecting the person. Just for a moment, we want to look at the different categories, these broken-hearted people. What are the underlying issues here? So there might be personal issues, loss, grief, trauma, betrayal, shame, abandonment, interpersonal issues like family and relational stress and conflicts. And then, of course, with mental illness, we can divide that into mild, moderate, and severe. So mild and mental illness would be things like burnout, maybe milder mood disorders, depression, anxiety. I guess we'd say the moderate mental illness is the can live with psychiatric disorders, maybe OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, or milder bipolar mood disorder. Severe mental illness could be more the ones that are hard to live with, like the chronic illnesses like schizophrenia, severe bipolar disorder. These kind of things are really challenging to live with and quite, extremely disabling. So as I move around in my roles in the global south, particularly in Asia, pastors, denominational leaders, seminary educators often ask, how can we help these people in our churches and communities who are challenged with mental and psychological problems? If you look at the stats again, less than 1% of most nations' health budget is spent on mental health. And in general, there's about 1 psychiatrist per million people. I know for a fact in Nepal, there's 1 Christian psychiatrist for, I think it's 26 million people, right? So, finding a Christian psychiatrist in a developing or global south nation can be quite a challenge. Compare that to in the West, developed world, the global north, they say, there can be up to 120 psychiatrists per million. And the budget of the health, the percent of the health budget spent on mental health is usually between 2 and 4%. So that's like 2 to 4 times, sometimes even 5 times as much as would be spent in a global south nation. What's the answer? Well, a good answer is train lay volunteers who can significantly assist. Who are those volunteers? Well, we should look in the Christian church. So if we think about Esther, here we are, we're in our medical clinic, we've got 3 to 4 minutes with her. What are we going to do? Okay, we can get her to come back for sure, and that would be very important. But at the same time, who else would be able to help? And if we categorize some of these people, we'd be looking at people like maybe distant family, she was rejected from her immediate family, but she may still have other family, aunties, uncles. She might have some friends. She might have, if she was around a church, she might have a small group, or maybe there might be a church group, a church mums group. These kind of people are time rich, but often skills poor, At the next sort of level, there may be lay or pastoral counsellors, maybe some other support group, prayer ministry. These people are also often not always, but can be time rich and have more skills. And then at the higher skills end, but time poor end, could be the family doctor, the counselling team, like the psychology, social work and so forth, and of course, psychiatrists. Numerous studies have been done on these things, and they all have the consistent answer that lay counsellors are an effective, scalable, affordable resource in addressing this massive global south mental health treatment gap, providing that shared care is done, especially if someone is, voicing some suicidal intent. The success of this program increases with supervision from a skilled supervisor, consistency of support and of the volunteer, and obviously experience, and if there's integration with the health system as well. This photo here is just of some Sri Lankan lay counsellors. A friend of mine is teaching in Sri Lanka. He's actually taught, I think, 14 cohorts, around about 500 people now, Christians from the church. Some are pastors, some are other, have other qualifications, other training, but they're just committed to caring for people. So he is mobilizing this movement of Christian lay and pastoral counsellors to care for the brokenhearted in Sri Lanka, of which there are many since the major collapse of the economy. I want to introduce a concept called the pyramid. We sometimes call the pyramid of care. And if we think of Esther, our client, we put her in the base, on the base of this pyramid, right? So there's Esther in the center of the pyramid, and around her, there's God. Whether she acknowledges God or not, God is above her. She may also, as we say, have family and friends who could help her. If she is introduced, even if she's not going to one, but if she's introduced to a local church, she can access maybe the pastor, maybe home groups, maybe some sort of support like the mums group, maybe a lay counsellor. And then she'd only have to see her family doctor or counsellor from time to time, because this can be collaborative care for her. Some advantages of this pyramid concept are that it's easily understood. It offers a common language. It invites the question, who is really there for her? And it also invites the carer to look for and fill the gaps, or introduce people for the gaps, so that her care can be shared. And of course, a shared load is a lighter load. It can be hard just to be one person looking after a depressed, suicidal 16-year-old, 26-week pregnant lady, right? But sharing that load together in a church setting, perhaps with some of those corners filled, all under the wonderful eyes of God, can be really empowering for her. So the different people in different corners would bring different gifts and capacities, and particularly the friends and family and church corner can offer support and love that we as professionals can't always so well do. And that love may actually be what actually brings her into the kingdom of God. So let's look at this again from a different angle. Many people have all these, have these personal issues, that shame, grief, loss, betrayal, and so forth. But there are many people who could be in this friends, family, church, pastor, home group, kind of lay counselor type of role, and they can help them with these kind of issues. If we look at the milder mental issues, then again, lay pastoral counsellors, sometimes support groups and prayer can help with these issues of burnout, the milder mood disorders and so on. And then the family doctor, counsellors and psychiatrists can, I guess, attend more to those people with the moderate and severe illness, the hard to control, the hard to manage psychiatric illness that we mentioned. Healing and sanctification brings transformation. Such people can then really say that they've been restored, renewed, and rebuilt. Just imagine this lovely lady, spending some time in a loving church setting. People find her a place to stay. People help her with her their needs of food, getting her back on her feet. And she's just slowly transformed, renewed, rebuilt. And she becomes an oak of righteousness for the Lord's splendor. Many such people want to help others. And as some of us have probably come to the point of realizing, it makes sense of suffering. Her tough times were for a purpose. She met God, she became a believer, and she grew a heart to care for other young mums who had nowhere to live and had been thrown out of home. So just have a think for a moment. Think about, maybe draw out a pyramid on your sheet of paper. Where do you have people on that pyramid that you refer to? And where may you have some gaps? It's highly likely you will have gaps, all right? But just identify the people you have. So, if you have a client like this lady, like Esther, you would refer her to friends and family. And that might just mean, well, have you thought about seeing an auntie? Can you go and see your auntie? Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. What about the pastor church small group corner? Do you have connections with one or a number of churches where you can refer people for care? Do you have some lay counsellors that you can refer to? Do you have a psychiatrist? Do you have some, professional counsellors you can refer to? So just draw that out for a sec. And then let's look at this concept of training. So in the using the pyramid, we can train lay counsellors, and some that's right. So key ingredients for success include a brief, structured mind and behaviour therapy approach, training for 2 or 4 weeks, and as we said, supervision is essential. And an example of this is the thing called the Friendship Bench in Zimbabwe, which has managed many patients over many years and has been highly researched. It's low cost and highly accessible for the community. And I would say it's a challenge for the Christian church, because I'm not aware that it's a Christian program. But I have had, when I explain this to people, they say, oh, we need to do this at our church. Okay, someone else doing this was a group called CCAT, Christian Counsellor Association of Thailand. They train and equip lay counsellors, pastoral counsellors with their 60-hour level 1, 60-hour level 2 course. And this is a team where they're training trainers. So this team are fresh or assistant trainers growing into this training role so they can train more and more people. Their contribution, beautifully, is being noticed by the Buddhist community of Thailand, which is the majority. The problem with having, low trained people, of course, is they may miss things. They don't know about diagnosis. They know about patterns, maybe, but they don't know about diagnosis. So we developed this scale called the SAFE scale, which looks at functionality and emotional state of the person. It's pretty easy to do. All you do is train your volunteers to ask on a 1 to 10 scale, where 1 is worst and 10 is the best, where have you been for the last week or 2 weeks? And if they say a 3 or less for functionality, or if they say a 3 or less for emotional state, if you have a fairly basic low-trained counsellor, then they should refer them to someone else, okay, for safe care, or if this person is suicidal. And if they're a somewhat trained person, but if they have a client who's recurringly 3 or less, or is deteriorating, as in that picture, then they too should be referred to the next level up of counsellor. Okay, so it's pretty simple, easy to use. Use in a moment. 1 to 10, how are you, functionally and emotionally over the last few weeks? Let's look at training pastoral counsellors. So these maybe have some more skills. Pastors generally have good interpersonal skills. And so let's look at some training situations that are being offered for these guys. In Singapore, the Association of Christian Counselling there run 2 programs. They run a mental health awareness program, which has been highly accessed by pastors. They run it, I think, 8 times a year, and they train pastors basically in mental health awareness, first aid. It's called first contact training. And they also have a pastors ministry Christian mental health worker conference, it's more in depth, a 3-day conference. They find a lot of pastors there are burning out. Singapore's a kind of a high heart rate society, and so many pastors are burning out. And so they really the Christian counsellors love to serve the pastors by offering free counselling, family support, and so forth. It's a lovely intervention. It's been going, I think, 4 or 5 years now, and it's quite inspirational. You could probably look up their website if you want to know more about that. Then let's look at training professionals. And I know on this program, actually, recently, well, not that, a little while ago, webinar 150, we had some Indian psychiatrists who were proposing a great system where, in areas of low psychiatric availability, they were working together with GPs, with family doctors, and they chose one person with a bachelor degree in that area, like maybe a pharmacist or a local engineer or a teacher at the school or something. They would train them together about how to manage mental health patients. And they were finding that there was about 80% could be treated well by those 2 people together. So not just the doctor, but the doctor engaging this kind of lay counsellor type level trained person. Very effective program, really worth a look. Webinar 150, that is. And then just briefly want to mention another system. This is what Living Wholeness does. We actually train people around the 4 corners of the pyramid. And we have a training pathway, which is really based on a biblically sound approach called the Christian Wholeness Framework. We're very much into train the trainer, training at each corner. We've developed this over many years. We've been involved in Asia about 20 years all up. This has been accessed by people from about 15 different countries in Asia. It's being taught in multiple languages. Some of it's available fully online, and some of it's being used even in a number of seminaries as well to train pastors at that beginner level. Let's look just for a moment now at national. What can be done at national level, right? So just imagine you have, a hospital clinic, maybe a family, general practice style clinic, maybe something run by the community health, Maybe out on that outside here, maybe there's some sort of other community project that just dips it a little bit into this counselling arena. As Christians gather together from these different backgrounds, as I say, lay, pastoral and professional counsellors, they can start to find lots in common and to be able to work together synergistically and find the benefits of developing a national Christian counselling association. One more step ahead of that is even to develop a regional Christian counselling association, as we've done in Asia. We have the Asian Christian Counselling Association, made up of around about, I think, 15 different national Christian counselling associations: Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Mongolia, so forth. And I have to say, this is immeasurably more than any of us ever imagined. But it's very, very robust as a organisation. We find that we can strengthen Christian counsellors, just validating them and giving them a place where they're known and accepted really just adds some sort of, some sort of empowerment to a lot of these people. We can share training courses across the pyramid. We can share resources together to help solve complex problems. We can offer the development of professional standards and safety, ethical guidelines. We can even be a voice to our communities. Research can begin to unfold. And sometimes even, we can access joint funding together. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. This Christian Counselling Association is really keen to assist the church in caring for pastors and their families who carry so much, in member care for missionaries and their families, training pastoral care workers and counsellors who support and develop maybe a ministry in the church setting, running parenting and family programs, and even missionary, pre-field missionary training. So the Christian counsellors can love the bride of Christ. Yeah. Christian counselling is also a powerful mission tool, whether it's through chaplaincy to prisons, schools, whether it's through helping communities face disasters and crises, whether it's, again, the marriage and family ministry outreach, teen camps. My friend down there in Sri Lanka, he runs teenage camps for churches, and every year they have more than 500 of these teenagers from all different backgrounds become believers in Christ. Drug rehab is another area where the Christian message is so powerful and so helpful. My son actually works in Christian drug rehab, and many of the people who come into that system become believers. Also supporting the service providers in our community and school guidance. So ACCA, Asian Christian Counselling Association, we have a website, asiancca.org, gives a whole bunch of things there. If you look up the handbook, vision, mission, values, and so forth, and also has a little article there on beginning an association. How do I begin a Christian counselling association, if that's what is on your mind? So let's just consider Esther. May God's church be mobilised together to care for the Esthers of this world. And may the Esthers of this world who find healing and life in Jesus gather together to help others. What do you think God might be inviting you to here for your Esthers and for your collaboration with others? Peter, that's it from me. Over to you for the discussion. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, David. We'll be listening to David Nikles on catalysing Christian counselling in the Global South. We've got time now for Q&A. David, I just wanted to start by asking about the need for education really about mental health. How much mental illness, and you talked about 80% of it all being in the global south, a similar percentage of suicide victims are there as well. How much mental illness is unrecognised and therefore untreated in the global south, and what's the role of stigma and prejudice here, and therefore the need for education? Can you just talk us a bit around those issues, particularly I'm thinking about in the churches?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. I think that's an issue everywhere in the world, prejudice and, I guess the stigma of having a mental illness. I would say that probably more in the West, these things seem to be, and maybe with the Gen Z, they seem to accept that mental illness is part of life. I think COVID, kind of normalized mental illness a bit, because there was so much of that during COVID. So I think for some people, there is less of a stigma, but in every country that I've been in the global south, there's massive stigma about mental illness, which precludes people especially from attending early if they have some sort of mental illness. As I said before, early treatment often makes so much difference, to some of these conditions. So, if there was education more widely available, if there was, better access to healthcare providers, then obviously that's going to raise the level of care and drop the incidence, of severe illness significantly. But it's a tough question. Resources are scarce. And that's why I think we have to do what we can. What can we do? Well, we can mobilise the church, as I've said, and particularly, as I said, those who, have been, had their own struggles with mental illness, perhaps, or they've had a family member who's had mental illness. They start to become aware of these things and more attuned, and they actually want to help. And they're the kind of people I think that we see coming to the trainings that we offer in different places. And they are, they're a highly available resource. You asked a little bit about training. I think these people should be trained. I've actually got a 6-hour video on mental health conditions, which is specifically for the lay and pastoral counsellor. So that could be a resource that could be shared with your listeners. But yeah, I think it's important that being aware of these things is part of the training for these people. The way we do it, we don't kind of offer a DSM-5 to people at this level, but we just talk about pattern recognition. So if you're seeing certain patterns in someone, then you might think, well, maybe there's a mental illness here. I probably should get this checked with maybe the GP at the clinic or something like that.
David, thanks for that. You've talked about some of the training programs that you've been involved in or have been supporting. Can you just talk us through a training program for lay counsellors? What sort of components would that have, and what kind of length and depth of training would be involved?
Yeah, I think there are lots of these things out there. Seems like the ones that have been written up, in the literature, generally they're between probably 5 days to 10 days, 30 to 60 hours, that sort of amount. The one I mentioned in Thailand, they have a second level, so another 60 hours. And that also involves, it goes on to have supervision, actual, group supervision, which is really, I think that is the key to helping these people, survive and thrive as a helper. If you're working with mental health and you don't have supervision or you don't have someone backing you up, it's a tough journey. And, to be honest, most people probably would burn out at some stage, So I think the key thing is good training, but ongoing support is vital. And that's why it can help, as I say, to have some sort of membership with associations, maybe a national association or so, because you can meet together with like-minded people. You can maybe find a supervisor, these types of things in that kind of setting. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. A lot of the countries you're working in are not Christian majority countries. Christians might be in a small minority, and the
Yeah.
prevalent context might be perhaps Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu or whatever.
Yeah.
Have you met much opposition in the training that you're doing from people with other worldview backgrounds? We're in the West, we're quite used to people from humanist or atheist backgrounds
Yes.
being
Yes.
exposed to Christian counselling. But what's your experience of the global South, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah. To be honest, I was deported from the country I was working in because it wasn't politically correct to be teaching Christian counselling. I'd been there for 14 years and, we'd established some very good training and fortunately, numbers of people that we trained were able to carry the baton and still carry the baton. But yeah, there was a resistance there. I would say, and that's probably because I was, acting in a missional kind of context. From what I'm aware, there are some very encouraging stories, the one I mentioned with CCAT in Thailand, the lady who's leading that, great counsellor, hard to train Christian counsellors. Thailand is a Buddhist majority nation. She's just started to do a PhD and she was accepted into this university, which is a Buddhist university. And they've given her, A, they gave her the PhD position. B, they gave her a scholarship, and C, they're fascinated by what she's doing, and D, they're really opening, really opening pathways for her to speak into the context there. So for me, that's very encouraging. I have, we probably don't have enough time to talk about some of the other stories, but in Sri Lanka, there, the army actually made way for these guys. They were helping debrief the war-torn Tamil Tiger trauma. And the army actually stood back and made way and actually even provided funding and opportunity for them, blessed them. That's probably from a mostly Buddhist, I think, and some Muslim backgrounds. Yeah, so there are some good stories out there.
Well, the need, of course, is incredible across all contexts, isn't it? A number of people are asking about resources, and just a reminder that we will write to you tomorrow and give you links to the various websites. And also people are asking about the diagram of the collaborative care pyramid. We'll be sending you a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation as well, so you will all have that. Can you comment a bit, David, about the difference between counselling and Christian counselling? We often hear that counselling should be non-directive or client-centered or whatever. How is Christian counselling different, both in terms of how directive it is and especially also its overlap with evangelism or perhaps even other Christian modalities like deliverance ministry as well?
Yeah, as I say, if you use the case of Esther, right? Let's say she was a Muslim. There she is in Pakistan, and obviously becoming Christian, there's a big price to pay, but still, it may be that she came to faith in Jesus because of the love and the care that she received when she was in massive need, and you can't deny that. That's a great opportunity for evangelism. I used to actually use this pyramid concept, when I was in general practice in Australia, and we had a great network of churches that we could refer people to. I think a lay counsellor and certainly a pastoral counsellor have a lot more freedom in terms of what they share about faith and so forth. They're not bound by professional, so-called professional ethical guidelines and so forth. So again, to refer a person to lay people and pastoral people, they may actually receive more love and more truth than sometimes we as potentially restricted professionals may be able to offer. So I think that's again an argument for accessing people like that to help our people when they're in need. I think different countries have different, laws surrounding about how much can be shared about faith from a professional. Certainly in Australia, that's limited unless the client is asking. But I think in many other countries, I think my sense is the door is still quite wide open there. Certainly in a number of the countries I work in, that doesn't seem to be a big restriction. But obviously, one needs to be very aware of one's power base. Like if you're a professional and you're seeing maybe a just literate patient, there is a power differential there, and it's important to never abuse that. But at the same time, it's also important to offer full, comprehensive, holistic care, not just a Band-Aid.
Sure. In approaching a church, question here, how would you introduce and build capacity with a counselling training program in a church where stigma and culture's very present and comes in the way perhaps of recognising mental illness or seeing it all as spiritual? You know what I mean?
Yep. I think that's what I said. It tends to be. I think the certainly in Bangladesh, right? We were asked. I sat in a meeting with key leaders of denominations in Bangladesh, and they said to me, "We need Christian counselling in this country. Can you help us?" And so it's the leaders, it's the maybe the senior people who have got over the fact that mental health has stigma attached to it. It's not the patients that are coming up and saying, "I need help," right? The ones who have the stigma, it's the people who are looking after them, who are saying, "Look, we need to provide good mental health care for there's so many people across our denominations that are suffering with mental illness." So it's those kind of people who approach us. And then what tends to happen is they will be aware of people who have this kind of calling, have been doing this kind of ministry. And so they'll suggest, well, how about you go to this training? How about you go along? And the word seems to get around. Once you've trained a couple of people, they'll send others and they'll send others, So it seems like there's always those people who are, I think God has put those kind of people in every community. And as they can come forward and seek to be trained, that's great. Of course, maybe just to address the other side of it, so many people and in the global south have this concept that it's everything that is mental illness is demonic. It just needs to be prayed out, these kinds of things. But I think as time's going along, many of these pastors are also learning that it doesn't always work, and there's other answers to these things. My friend in Sri Lanka, when he was trained through our system about holistic Christian counselling, he was able to offer the pastors really good answers. Like, psychological problems are not just spiritual. Like, they're not just demonic, They can be, mental health. They can be traumatic. They can be, genetic. They can be biological, So there's a number of different causes, not just the demonic. Having said that, of course, the demonic can also have a influence, but I think there's a discernment that's really important, and it's up to us, I think, to educate the church and the pastors that there are, there are more ways, there are more causes than just one. But it's a challenge. It is a challenge.
Yeah, so this cuts right at the issue of being truly holistic, doesn't it? And I think all of us are going to bring our particular experiences and biases and worldviews to it. And at the one end, of course, you have people, as you've said, who may see everything as demonic, needing deliverance. And at the other end, of course, there are those who see everything as not just psychological, but as physical, as biochemical,
Yes.
in a
Yes.
sense, needing just
Yes.
pharmacological solution. So how do you really bring in a clearly holistic approach which embraces everything from biochemistry to the classic mental illnesses, the spiritual issues around meaning and purpose, to areas where there's actual demonic activity there? How does one go about this? And is it different in different worldview contexts in Asia, in your experience?
Yeah, maybe I'll just show you where are we? Just a slide I've got here. This is, I find, a very helpful diagram. A lot of detail, but what it shows is that I guess this is a kind of holistic model of the person, right? So we'd say that people have social interaction beyond themselves, but then they're a physical being with a mind and a heart, and unfortunately, the spirit didn't come out. But in the middle, there's the spirit as well. Sorry, I'll just make that clear so everyone gets it. Right, so there's a spirit. So there's a, spirit. We have a spirit within our heart, within our mind, within our body, within our social setting. And then there are all these different aspects to a person. So as doctors, we mainly treat the soma, like the physical body. Psychologists might treat thoughts and moods. Psychotherapists might more treat attachment, which is love, identity, which is truth, choice, which is control there. So this model helps us hone in on what maybe where are the main points of challenge for the person, and then we can maybe tailor a therapeutic response depending on where the main problems are. So if the main problems are just, maybe they have hypothyroidism and therefore are depressed, that's a soma issue. And so that would be fixed, with thyroxine. But if the issues are mainly, from the past, and perhaps, challenges with growing up with attachment, maybe in an orphan, for example, that would have a lot more to do with the love sector. And so we would normally we work with the client, with Jesus, actually. So we would help this person bring their sense of abandonment to Jesus and see how Jesus interacts with that person. It's quite a precious and often profound experience to be involved in someone's healing to that depth. And obviously you need to have moderate amount of training. We would normally suggest that someone is part of our 400-hour training to do this kind of therapy. But yeah, so being aware of the different aspects, different parts of a person can be really helpful. It's like psychological anatomy. And when I did medical school, I had to learn about, 10,000 anatomical parts. This is just 27, so it's a lot easier.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm afraid we've pretty much run out of time now, but I just wanted to ask you in closing, one of the key takeaways for me, really, listening to you today, was when you said that the answer, pretty much a big part of the answer, is lay volunteers, and particularly within the Christian church. And I was greatly encouraged to hear that within the Asian Christian Counselling Association, you've got 15 different national associations. And I suspect a lot of people on this call may be from those countries, but may not know about them. So how can people access the National Christian Counselling Associations, find out if there is one in their country, see what resources are already available? Just a couple of words on that.
Yep. Really just go to Asian CCA, right? So www.asiancca, so that's .org,
Yeah.
asiancca.org. That's the website for Asian Christian Counselling Association, and it lists all the countries that have a national association. It has contact details, and so that's how they could contact their national association. If they find there isn't one and they're interested in developing one, then actually we'd love to hear from you, and we can help you on that journey. We started with 6 members in about 8 years ago, and there's now about 15. So yeah, we're quite familiar with how to help people, develop an association that can then become part of ACCA. And we run conferences, we run webinars like this. We support people as they're developing their association. We have a mentorship program where we help, countries start to form such things. Yeah, and we'd love to hear from people.
Brilliant. So you can help people through the steps. So, well, sadly, we've run out of time. Dave, we've still got some more questions, but we'll have to call a halt there. But thank you so much for your time today, for your experience that you've shared, for your preparation, and for your insights. And it's been incredibly encouraging to hear about all that's happening and the resources that are available. And we look forward to seeing you again soon on ICMDA webinars. May the Lord really bless you